City of Stevens Point Board of Park Commissioners meeting, recorded November 6, 2024.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November 6, 2024 Board of Park Commissioners meeting. Just a few notes for tonight's on item number 5, the presentation for the preliminary draft for Zenoff and Goerke Park. We're going to take each item separately. We'll first open up with a presentation, then we'll transfer to the board members, and then I'll open up for community discussion and comments. If you do want to comment, please go up to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll go from there. We'll do each one separately. So, item number 1, roll call.
Alder Broderick.
Here.
Alder Boozy. Here. Freckman. Here. Disher.
Here.
Ledusky.
Here.
Alder Kiemer.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
Shabilsky.
Here.
Sorensen.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item number 2, the approval of the October 2nd, 2024 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve as written.
Second. Okay, any questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, presentation of the 2024 Donald Copps Municipal Pool usage and financials by Superintendent Hylla.
Good evening. Okay, so this year, like my previous years at the pool, were a very successful, fun summer for all. We had a bit of a longer season, 11-week season this year as opposed to our typical 10, and I think it was just us trying to push the envelope on the beginning of the season with school closing, but we were able to get 11 weeks in there, so that was nice. We again had 28 staff members, a lot of returners, many second, third, and even longer serving members of that staff, a good tight-knit group, and I think a nice little community that we have built with the staff members and their siblings also joining the ranks as they become of age. So happy to see that group of people thriving. We had over 12,000 visitors. That number is kind of a low ballpark because we can't track them all as families scan individually, but I'll get into more of those details in a minute. There were 9 saves this season, which is the exact same number as last season. So that's 9 times a guard had jumped in the pool when a swimmer was in distress. And then we also had 35 dogs at our annual dog swim. So the happy dogs there. Taking a little bit closer look at our visitors. I have 3 years just as comparison here. You can see that our numbers have been growing over the past year, since last season, I should say. Our paid admissions, just under 9,000. Private rentals, this is anytime someone rents the pool for private use, like scuba lessons or private diving lessons or even pool parties. Majority of that number comes from our pool parties, which we have large numbers, 50 to 100 plus people will come and rent out the pool for a couple hours. Our season pass holders, again, we had 180 this season, family pass members. So that's I don't know how many members are in each of those families, but you can see that the families themselves checked in 2,500 times plus. So individually, I don't know how many. We don't track it to that nth degree, but a fair amount nonetheless. So that brings us to our total of known 12,000 plus visitors through the summer. We did complete some significant repairs this summer. We needed to replace a pump and igniter on our main pool water heater. This is a very sizable heater, and we can't operate without it because the water needs to be at a certain temperature for us to open as part of the state code. We also needed to repair our slide pool circulation pump, and these pumps are, large, powerful, and expensive. And so, with chemicals and water running through them, oftentimes rust builds up and they seize up, and that's what happened here. So we had to have that one rebuilt a little bit. Looking ahead to next year, we already know that we have these planned repairs. This was ahead of the condition report, which we'll talk about next. So at the end of the season, we were without our wading pool. That's the baby pool for 5 days or so because the circulation pump completely died, and so that will be a replacement we'll need to, we plan on using our operation funds for in 2025. As well as our gel coating on the slide is failing at the bottom of the slide, and this is a maintenance piece that we do every year, every couple years. It's a very flat part of the slide, and so it seems to fail more so than the rest of the slide, which is at a pitch. So there's a good sized patch that needs to be repaired for that. And then our pool main grates. These are the grates at the bottom of the well where they are, per state code, need to maintain specific design so they don't entrap someone at the bottom of the slide with the suction from the circulation pumps. So those get replaced every 5 years. This one's coming due and will be replaced in the spring for the 25 season. Moving on. So financially, we're doing well. Every year, the city expects to lose a little money on the pool as part of an amenity that the city community provides itself. And so this year is no exception to that. You can see there, year to date, there might be a few bills outstanding yet, but we're still within that budget, so we're doing okay for this operating year. And then just in preparation of the larger conversation that we're going to be having about the pool and its condition, I did a little zoom in to see what the past 10 years have looked like financially. So looking at the expenses and the revenue that come through the pool and what the deficit is from year to year. And essentially the community accepts the 68% average budgeted deficit annually to have the pool as part of our community. The actual deficit, I'm happy to report, is slightly less than that at 59% when you're averaging out these, I guess it's 9 years. And then even in more recently, the last 4 years, we've been doing even better than that at a 55% deficit. So trying to do our best with the resources we have and keeping the pool up and running. Just taking a minute to talk about our admission fees. We really try to maintain a low admission fee. While we have restructured our fees somewhat over the past 5 years, adding in the non-resident fee, which essentially tacks on $1 for either the open swim or the lap swim sessions, we still keep it very low. And since 2013, the admission fee has been $3 for open swim, and then in 2022 it was raised to $4, so still very affordable overall for admission to the pool. One expense that has been increasing over the past few years is our chemical expense. We have seen I would say a fairly dramatic increase since 2022, where we did 2 years at about $10,000 of chemical. Then in 2023 it was $14,000, and then in 2024 it was $16,000 plus. So I attribute that to the rise in cost of the chemical itself and delivery fees, but also increased use in the pool. More bodies in the pool requires more chemicals. That kind of thing. And then, of course, wage increases. We have very competitive wages for our seasonal staff, which is great because we have people that want to work, and we are always fully staffed. We've never had guard shortages and never had to close down due to that. And those returners every year that I talked about earlier. So a little bit about the budget there. Looking at capital projects over the years, we have spent $367,000, and some of these have been really large projects, some of them not so much, like a full filtration system replacement in 2019. Before we did that replacement, we were using like $20,000 of chemical annually, and then that was reduced to 10 with the new system. So that was a nice savings at that time. That equipment, was aged out and needed to be replaced. Other major costs was the replastering of all 3 pools. So that gets done about every 12 years as the chemicals and the UV and the wear and tear on the plaster of the wells. It can only withstand so many years before it needs to be recoated, and that was to the tune of $150,000 at the end of 2022. And then our most recent capital repair was the guardhouse, where we saw last year the mortar was failing and bricks were, moving apart, and it became a safety issue. So we put $20,000 into just making sure the guardhouse sticks together, and removed some of the problematic brick as well. So there's the snapshot of the pool. I think the discussion about the condition of the pool is a welcome one. And we'll talk about how old the pool is, but also just keep in mind, this community and the use of the pool and how we only have one guarded public pool, which is our DCMP, Donald Copps Municipal Pool. Every year it's inspected by the health inspector, passes with flying colors due to the care of the pool staff, and how affordable it is, how close by it is, and what a benefit it is, and for, I think, a meager financial investment on the city's behalf. So with that, I thank you and welcome any questions.
Mr. Chair, I'll just add, so just on the financials, just to paint a picture here. So municipal pools are not in the business to profit typically, right? If you check the model anywhere, the newer the facility, for example, Marshfield shared with us when they built their new facility, typically attendance numbers spike massively high. The newer amenities will bring a larger bather load and things too. So newer the facility, typically the closer to the black, or sometimes you might even be in the black you'll be. And then as the facility ages, it's not uncommon. This is from in the industry, what we tell with our associations, that red number usually gets larger. In our case too, where we'll be talking of fees and charges later today, where we've actively the community said we want to make this as affordable as possible. As you do raise wages, as chemical goes up, as different costs of even contractual labor goes up for some of the maintenance items, we are certainly seeing a little bit of that. Where even with increased usage, that's why the deficit hasn't really been massively different. But we certainly are taking on more expenses than we did when wages were $9 an hour compared to say 14 or 15 that we're doing now. So. We're going to go into condition report next, but certainly want to commend Ann and Greg and their team for a lot of this data that you're seeing this year, as well as the last couple of years when we've done these presentations, are a direct result of the Civic Rec system, their implementation of it as we're taking on the different reservations, as well as trying to track these things more and more, certainly leading into bigger conversations that we're going to be having here over the next several months. So again, kudos to them for all they're doing and trying to balance all the different users that do use the pool. So.
All right, thank you. All right. So we'll go on to the condition report, item number 4. Dan, you want to?
You bet. I'm going to just quick load one more slideshow here. It's going to be the night of slideshows tonight. Okay, so the Donald Copps Municipal Pool Condition Report is something that's been on the horizon since we've done the Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, and it essentially moved a little faster because of basically conditions that we were experiencing. So this is a lengthy report. If you get into it, the condition report is not just the couple problems that are large that we're facing, but it really, the consultant we worked with went through and took pictures, and you saw and read through the report of pretty much every nook and cranny of the different things inside Donald Copps Municipal Pool. So the first thing that led us down this road was it did get listed in the Comprehensive Outdoor Rec Plan, as we knew that our community survey, when we had about 1,800 participants, this was kind of the largest item that kept coming up about community benefit, and our community saying we're leaving town a lot to go to the neighboring municipal pools and aquatic centers and wanting the city to look into it. That fast forwarded this happening sooner because we did notice a couple of conditions. The first one was the settling on the pool deck that we started to notice at the beginning of this year, and it got to a point where we noticed it as a trip hazard. And because of the age of our facility, heaving of the concrete at the actual pool deck is not normal. Usually that means something is happening underground. It's not just something that you cut out a section and replace. You dig deeper. So when we started the pool up, we were able to identify it right away. We work with Badger Swim Pools on these elements a lot, and we were able to open the pool as we kind of started to troubleshoot more, knowing that we were going to dig deeper as soon as the season got underway. We've also had to add some water to the slide pool, which will be referred to as the plunge pool in the report if you read it correctly. And we've done some small plumbing changes with supply lines and the way we handle that the last 2 seasons, but we knew that was something we also had to address, and we're going to try to dig deeper into it. Rainmaker is the name that you'll read in the report, and they were actually who did the full design of the mechanical room that we did in 2019 that Ann referenced. So they were familiar with the plans, and some of our plans go back to the 50s. So it was great to not have to bring somebody up to speed. And they also specialize in aquatic facility, not only new design, but redesign, which is why we were able to use them back then. So within our operational budget, we were able to make it work to do this plan and try to get something more on file to troubleshoot, as well as to help us with our future conversation, which we're about to start here at the next item. Just some history. The main pool, if you look back, actually, Steve's in the audience. He sent me a couple of photos. Steve Chisel, one of the neighbors, from 1955 back to 1960. We did confirm that original pool was 1958, looking at our documents and the aerial imagery. And you read that right? That's 66 years ago. The slide pool was something that was added later in 1990, and if you read the report, you'll see there was some updates in the 70s, around 1970, concrete decks and things around the main pool. But the asbestos pipe and some of the elements of that original pool are still in there. So the actual pool structure itself has certainly served the city very well, and that's due to great maintenance and great labor by our team, as well as the high usage and trying to stay the city committed to continuing to operate that facility for all these years. Upgrades have happened. The first part of this agenda tonight was to really show that it's not unusual for us to do painting, to do tuck pointing. It's not unusual for us to do tiling every year. There's annual maintenance at the pool that the city puts in the operational budget, but when you list them in a report, it's certainly, if you're not familiar with pool operations, you show up the first day we open, you think, this thing's just, you don't do nothing to it. But the city does spend over a month, our staff, starting with things that have kind of broken the year prior. So there has been a lot of small things that we take care of that are in this report that we'll take care of even for next year, but because the condition was done at the end of the season, some of those things will carry during the closeout, which we're pretty well done with now, and then into the startup next year. But there is a couple big items that we wanted to cover here in a shorter version in this slideshow. So again, the biggest one is that deck settlement. So I'll show you an aerial image on the next slide, but where the deck is settling, we figured that meant a leak of some sort underneath that's either hollowing out the support, so the sand and the stone underneath, and that's what's causing that shift. It wasn't a massive shift right away, so the good news was we figured it was probably a slower leak is what we believe versus gushing water. We didn't have cracking of the concrete, but it was something that we knew had to be looked into. How that slide tank or the surge tank works, especially if you are in the pool and water is splashing over into the gutter system, it carries that water in through asbestos pipe around the exterior of the pool to a surge tank, controlling that volume that's coming into it. Once it hits there, it's able to settle itself and head into the tank or to the piping that goes back to the control room. That water is recirculated, retreated, and put back in the pool. So it's more complex than that, but that's the simplest way, and I'll show you a diagram of what that looks like. The plunge pool, which is much later, is not asbestos pipe, and it's a slightly different system, but there we believe it might be related to some of the actual piping that we're going to be able to do some pressure testing on and some cammering, and we hope we can maybe find a way to fix that without having to cut concrete very thoroughly either. And then there's a main pool heater exhaust that's right outside of Louvre on the building that is definitely something we need to address, but it's not structural. We're not cutting concrete. So those are really the three biggest items that come to the front of the report. If you read it, it's on page 1. In the recommendations, those items are put together. I think they're listed as 4 items because the deck and the surge tank leak below it are separate. I combine them together because they're causing each other. But that's the first thing that we really need to address as we're looking to the 2025 season to try and open. There are more items. So if we talk about a facility like this, you'll see things about like doors rusting. You'll see like a cracked counter. Again, some of the tiles and the depth markers, some of that stuff, we might do some sanding and painting, and we work through those things. And before, say, we put a $4,000 or $5,000 door replacement on, it really, we're looking to some of that direction we're going to talk about of what does 5 years look like, 10 years look like, before we start really breaking further into the building. And some things, again, we do with paint and some tiling and some other kind of mechanical things. So there's several aesthetic items, or there might be areas where they talk about some sharps, things that we'll actually work on. They're in the report. They're certainly important to be documented, but it's because this report is so thorough, even above those major items. This aerial image, just to help kind of bring this all of what we're talking. Here is the main pool structure, so our lap swim pool and the deep well. This is the mechanical room. If you can see, you can't see my mouse, I'm sorry. The mechanical room is on the, call it the south end, the bottom of the T. That is what actually controls that main pool. If you're looking to the bottom right-hand corner, so if you look just off the right of the bottom of the T, that is where the deck was settling. We actually painted that little bit of a trip hazard this year. The surge tank sits right below that. If you look up then to the right where the slide kind of weaves, it's difficult to see our plunge pool or our slide pool, but that is where that sits. And then there's another building to the right of it that runs the mechanics for that. So the filtration, the chemical treatment. The building there is on your far left, so you have a changing station for on the top and the bottom and the main core of the building. And again, looking at how this was kind of constructed, if you look at the original imagery, it showed the building, it showed the pool and very little concrete around it. Likely that some of the concrete and things came in the 70s and then the 90s when they built the rest of that additional, the addition on. So again, just kind of showing the aerial image. This is a page from the report that talks about those recommendations. Again, really 4 that are right at the forefront that I've already covered. And then there's some other items that we plan to address in operational budgets, and we can budget for the future, especially if the facility is going to continue to stand the way it does now for the foreseeable future or several years. This is just a diagram to talk about what I was explaining before. So the highlighted section around that sideways T I'll describe, that's the asbestos pipe. And if you look at the rectangle on the bottom left-hand corner of that, that's the surge tank underground. So imagine the water splashing around the whole pool into the gutter, filtering itself back by gravity towards that surge tank, and then it feeds back into the mechanical room. On the bottom is kind of a cross-section, so showing that asbestos pipe that's in the gutter. And if you look at that, it's encapsulated in concrete. So when we talk about the leak in the surge tank, the allowances that we're going to talk about here in a second too, is kind of talking worst case scenario. If we had to bust a bunch of concrete and chase a bunch of pipe, potentially even get a remediation contractor involved, we wanted to just say what's the worst, hopefully, scenario we'd run into. In talking with the pool contractor, we do believe because that stretch of pipe is encapsulated in concrete, that's not the leak. The leak is more likely isolated to the tank, we believe, and we're hopeful that with the contractor coming on site soon that we can bring the cost down as we dive deeper. But again, it's from the consultant standpoint of looking at, hey, what's kind of things that the worst you could plan for? They laid it out to say, hey, this could go further than just that tank itself. This next drawing is even more complicated, but if you look at the top right, you'll see kind of the stairwell of the slide pool that heads to the right that has the lines that are going across. There's the pipe in the drains that's in the middle of it. That's the first pipe that we're going to pressure test in camera and see if that's where the leak is coming from in relation to the drains. Why this one could be more complicated is if that was the case, that pipe is underground, and with the building being so close, it comes under the concrete deck and then up into that building. So it's not things that are exposed that you can go along the side. With the cameras and potentially some of the technology with the way you can fix, this is non-asbestos pipe. We're hopeful that maybe there's a different fix that won't involve having to cut a bunch of concrete. There's also options of maybe just potholing an area if we can identify where it is and going straight down, fixing it, and then being able to do a smaller repair. Again, the allowances in the cost estimates are talking about a much more larger repair because it could be, but we are going to dig deeper on the 12th when we bring an actual pool contractor up to follow up on this condition report. So again, this page here that's on the slideshow just shows a $93,000 number, right? And this is kind of encapsulating allowances based on their best guess, what they've seen on some bid items with some of the newer facilities that they've done renovations on, as well as talking with the pool contractor. And to just, so we didn't come tonight and tell you we don't know anything, right? We do know a fair amount of what we're working with, but we've not dug into the next step, which will happen on November 12th. So just to summarize this, next steps is Badger Swim Pools, who's our commercial partner we work with every year, will be on site on November 12th. Our utility department is agreed to work with us, and they work with a cammering system with some of the piping that they work with. So we're going to pair them with our contractor and our staff. We'll run those cameras through if we can find an area that might be leaking with the pressure testing. And then we're also going to crawl into that surge tank and do visual inspections to see if there's cracking or other things that can be repaired before we would start chasing it back around the pool deck. Following that investigation, we believe we'll know the extent of the leaks more closely, and we'll know what we're actually getting ourselves into. And then we can get into basically the talk of repair. I will tell you that in working with the city comptroller's office, the city budgets annually for unplanned facility repairs, citywide, system-wide. There's about $27,000 remaining in that fund. In working with the comptroller, the belief is if this repair ends up being, or these 3 major repairs end up being less significant, we would just move forward, keep us on schedule for 25, and use those funds. If it's more than that or forecasted to be more than that, it will go right to the city alders most likely based on timeline to the November Common Council, and then they will be discussing what we do next in terms of spending if it's more money than that. And again, right now I can't really forecast it. I just know I think we have the right people involved and we have a pretty good idea where we're going. At the end of the day, the exhaust repairs and the other items are things we plan to tackle with our operational budget. We're really most concerned with those leaks and making sure we've got that taken care of, and then we'll go on to exhaust and the other items. So our goal here, again, is to be open for 2025, and we believe that we'll get there, but first we have to kind of go through these next steps in order. Looking ahead, again, I mentioned what the estimate shows, that $93,000 number. A new facility, if you looked on the report, not talking about demoing the old one, is going to range somewhere between 7.5, and if you start getting into more specialty items, we're talking more probably 10 or 12 million if you're going to demo the other facility and getting into what some of our neighboring municipalities are doing. So it's a significant investment when we get to that conversation. So staff is under the belief right now, and that's why I wanted to make the report here tonight too, to say that the costs we're talking about in putting into this to make these repairs, as well as obviously the impact and the number of visitors that are coming through, it's a worthwhile expense to keep the facility operating. And if you read tucked deep down in the report, Raymaker mentions that the age of this facility, it's actually in really good shape due to the maintenance that's been going on. And that, while again, a report can show like, oh my, it's not an oh my situation. We really have 3 big items that are going on. And these repairs, because of the rest of the structure being sound, we believe can position us to run this pool for 5 years or longer if we need to, and allow more of this planning and partnership conversations to continue forward. With that, I know I was talking fast. I guess I want to answer any questions I can, as well as I'd welcome the Park Commission if you see other direction you'd like staff to do, or if you think those costs are unreasonable for some reason and would like us to step back. Otherwise, we will move forward on the 12th with the investigation on a time and material basis. We're probably talking hundreds of dollars or maybe a couple $1,000s. That'll paint the bigger picture for the larger repair, and then it'll either be fast-tracked if it's less than that 27 number, or it'll go before our city alders after that.
All right, thanks, Dan. Oh, wait.
Dan, you talked a lot, we got pictures thanks to Steve, and 66 years old. What is a realistic shelf life for a pool like this?
I've seen them all over the board. Don't quote me exact numbers, but I think Marshfield's was maybe 5 or 8 years older than that on some of their main structures. If you get down in the Milwaukee region, I know of some that they get up into the 7-year range and then they fail big time. So what Rainmakers told us is they believe we're at the planning stage to say you're going to have more significant capital investments if we're going to just leave it the way it is. But again, the way it operates, they think there's nothing to say that this can't run another 5, 7, 8 years if we do make the repairs.
It's a wonderful asset. It's used by a lot of users, but this starting to feel like a used car that you absolutely love but can't afford to keep fixing after a while.
Right.
So I'm glad that we're kind of in a time frame where we can, think about what short-term and long-term planning might be.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, we're not looking for a motion, just the direction we should be heading, so.
Yeah, if Park Commission's comfortable, that's how we'll keep going. And I'll have a report for you next month regardless, but if there's an action item in between, it would go likely right to the council, just because we will not know before finance because of the 12th date that the contractor is going to be on site.
All right, thank you. And Superintendent Hylla, good presentation, and Dan, so, all right.
Do you want to offer public comment in case somebody has it? I don't know if anybody does.
Does anybody have any comment regarding this item? As you state your name and go up to the podium in your address.
Thanks. Haven't been to a city council meeting forever, and then I end up coming to 2 in 1 month. I just want to make a couple of comments. This will be really quick. I'm a swimmer. I love.
Could you just state your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry, Trish Baker.
Thank you.
And I also have to confess, I live in Park Ridge. Sorry. But I have been an annual pass holder for just about 30 years, with the exception of 2020 when the pool wasn't open. But I have to say I'm a swimmer, and when you swim, you kind of get into this zen and this kind of zone. And I composed in my head this beautiful thank you note to everyone that runs the pool the last couple of days. And I have thought about this many times, and I thought, God darn it, why didn't I put that in writing? And thank you guys. The pool is such a wonderful asset. It is run wonderfully. The staff is wonderful. And I'm one of those people that comes almost every single day all summer long. And I have to say there's a group of us here today that are all kind of just like me. Some of us come a couple times a day. So we're big users of the pool. What I wanted to say to you was thank you for having the pool. Thank you for investing in it. Thank you for the presentation tonight. And I think as a person who actually saw a 4-year-old child who hadn't received swimming lessons nearly drown, I cannot overestimate I cannot tell you how important it is to have this asset to teach children how to swim, that it is such an important thing for our community. And then also with all of the children that go there, it gives them something to do. So it's such an asset. And I'm glad to hear the report, and I encourage you to continue moving forward on maintaining this facility. But I wanted to say, as you think about what's going to come next, there's a group of us that would like to help you think about that and kind of be a part of that. And we'd all like you to tap into the resources and time and talents that we have in reaching out into the community to make sure that what you build in the future and what you think about is really reflective of all the needs of the community. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry I didn't write my letter and forward it in, but maybe it's better I'm actually telling these guys here. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Deb McGill, and I'm also, confession, not a Stevens Point resident. I come from Plover nearly every day to use this pool because we don't have anything like this. And I have been in this community for almost 40 years now, and I'm grateful for it. I was from Rapids. They don't have a pool anymore. You know, it's sad. Yes, they have a nice little river, lazy river and splash pad, things like that. Plover now has a splash pad. But I think you need to realize and look long-term to keep a pool, because a pool teaches life skills, like Trish said, kids to learn to swim. I have to say, as an adult, I didn't learn how to front crawl until I was 60 years old at the pool in a summer session. I could swim on my back, but not front crawl. So, you know, it's certainly something that changes a life, and we can't always just do things that kids can play in. We have to teach life skills, and we have to let them create their own fun, and a pool offers that. And I have to applaud Ann and Greg, the staff. They do a wonderful job. Some of the changes you've done for lap swim, I know I've seen a lot more people use the pool. So thank you all, and please don't just take a pool away. Again, you mentioned the car analogy, and I do agree. Yeah, at what point do you get rid of that car you love? But at the same time, you divide that over 5 years to keep maybe a $3,000 car repair going and keep that car going versus spending $40,000, $50,000. So think all that through. And again, I applaud everybody for the maintenance and all that you've done. So I have to say thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you for your comments. Anybody else from the board? Any other? Liz?
I would just like to make a comment, and thank you, ladies, for coming in and expressing your opinion on the pool. Trish, you noted that you live in Park Ridge, and our other speaker lives in Plover, and you notice that the pool runs at a deficit. And I know that you pay a pretty small annual fee to come in and swim, but would you be interested in doing some fundraising or looking to the municipalities that you live in to see if they wouldn't make some kind of a contribution to help the pool or to help the parks in general? I know that Park Ridge used to do that, but they quit doing that a number of years ago.
You know, I'd be open to a conversation about it.
Great, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Being none, okay, let's move on to item number 5, the presentation of the preliminary draft for Zenoff and Goerke Park Master Plan. So again, as I stated earlier, we'll handle each one separately, starting with Zenoff with the presentation, opening up to the commissioners, and then opening up to the audience if anybody has any comments or questions. So, all right.
Okay, so this slideshow was in your packet, and most of it is things you probably don't have a chance to read through, but I'm going to run through it. There's probably some things I'll add to it as well. The first, it's only a few slides here to get through Zenoff, and then I'll stop kind of at the direction that I'm looking for as staff. And like the chair kind of said, then from there, if, you know, willing to take all the feedback, certainly hear anybody that's in the residents. You know, what this is set up to be is, this is a pretty lengthy process. So we've already been having conversations for some time, and no action's taken, and really nothing's come forward because this is impactful in a lot lot of different ways, not only just to the park system but in the user groups, but certainly those that surround these facilities and areas, and then also the individuals' operations that could be partners and things on this too. So if you recall, in 2023, we adopted the 2023 through 2028 Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, and that is not unusual for the city. That plan is done every year, every 5 years, I should say, because it keeps us grant eligible. It really points the compass and tells us as we're moving into different park developments and things that we're doing, that it's something that we kind of had on the radar screen previously, and also kind of tells us a gauge to say, oh, we did knock out these 20 things over the last 5 years, and it keeps kind of a history for the Parks Department too. In that comprehensive outdoor rec plan, it did call for master plans, and sometimes we get asked, well, what's the difference? Really, the corp plan is high level, basically like, there's some small opportunities, and here's the more, this is the 40, 50,000 square foot view. When we get into master planning, we really dial into some more of the fine details. It's not design. So, for example, when we talk about Zenoff, we might say another ball diamond or 2 ball diamonds. It's not saying exactly that the ball diamond will have a 6-foot high fence and it'll be exact different dimensions, but it's going to plop something in a footprint so we kind of know what it is. So when we get into design, we know where it sits and we know a rough footprint. So again, corp usually will just be really rough, almost napkin drawings. They look a little nicer than that. They'll say things about strategic, this or that, or they'll say, here's opportunities to put some trails and pathways in, but it doesn't get real detailed. The master planning process dials that even further, and typically after master planning is when you start getting into actual fundraising or budgeting to do construction. So these master plans were called for Goerke and Zenoff Park, 2 community-wide parks. There is others in the corp plan, I will tell you, that do call for doing master plans, parks like Iverson. We started here just based on a lot of the different feedback and really items that we've been asked, and knowing the pool condition that we're working with, as well as different amenities that were going on at Zenoff about more space, more usage. So these were the first 2 that were approved by the Park Commission to move forward. Rattler was selected as the consultant to help us with the planning phase. They do a lot of the drawing side of things, and really kind of after we package up the data collection and ask for things, seeing if it can fit, and really making it look professional for us. Staff and my team really does most of the conversation aspects, certainly take all the feedback here and community input. So they did our corp plan. They are moving forward now, and you hired them, or we hired them for the master planning process. So really what we did first is talked about known opportunities. What that term means is really the things that I get asked quite frequently when I get a call saying, from one of the user groups, hey, can you do this, can you do that? Other things that have been around from previous projects that we might have did years ago in these parks. And we started talking about, okay, let's identify a list, and I'll talk about them at both of these. From there, we started to meet with what I'll call the initial users, kind of the biggest checkers on the checkerboard is probably the best way I can phrase it. For example, SPSA, the Stevens Point Softball Association. In Goerke, we talk about, Boys and Girls Club, our own aquatic facility. Some of the bigger, what I would say, moving pieces before we just, move forward with something, the ones that we wanted to get feedback from. After we had those initial conversations, that's what led us really here to today, to say, hey, Park Commission, here's some of the things, and to make sure that I, as director, and my team are kind of headed down the right road before we get too far along. Following tonight's kind of preliminary input, we're going to go to all kinds of additional user input, as well as one of the biggest elements, which will be community input, not only for the adjoining neighbors and kind of property owners, as well as the people that are right adjacent to the park, but because these are community-wide parks, the community as a whole. Certainly it serves more than just the neighborhoods they're in. So because of timeline, it's hard to predict the exact time. But what I laid out for you here, what we're kind of talking about is following tonight, we're probably likely to have 6 or 8 weeks of kind of having more conversations with individual users and stakeholders, and then we're going to need to schedule those and invite the actual community input meetings. Park Commission, I'm envisioning you're going to probably need at least 2 kicks at this can yet with all of that packaged up information, and then eventually in mid to late 25, you'll have some options in front of you to consider taking adoption of. That will be then moved on to the Common Council, who ultimately adopts it in the end. I added the disclaimer, and I'm sure you saw it. We are planning, so that's it. So tonight is not necessarily formal action of any sort. It's not saying this is what we're doing, but it's really, I'm asking you to point me in a direction again to make sure the way we're headed is okay. It can be changed later. Certainly the feedback needs to come from the residents and the user groups, and then that feedback is where you'll all be tasked really to weigh the pros and cons of what direction we officially go. Certainly I'm going to make some recommendations to you along the way, and we'll try to get all the feedback items to you in the most kind of summarized version possible, but I do just want to let you know that we are planning. Even if we adopt a plan, it could be 25, it could be 50, it could be 100 years for something happens, and also we can never predict what the circumstances are 10 years from now, where all of a sudden something might be tweaked and changed. So it's not uncommon for plans also to be slightly altered, but this does help us really identify the spaces and how all these pieces fit together. Okay, so moving into Zenoff Park, which is kind of the first half of this, the known opportunities that were on my radar screen here since I've been here for the last almost 5.5 years was another field. So I can tell you, the youth groups have told me over and over again that they've always had a desire for a complex in Stevens Point. At one time, and still, the SPSA was the mecca of adult softball, and adult softball was off the charts. And we actually have the president of adult softball on the board, and he certainly could talk about it too. We were gangbusters for size in terms of tournament, in terms of actual leagues during the weekend tournaments. They still run a healthy amount of tournaments that use all 3 fields, but we do have, with the turf project that happened in 2019, an increasing usage of youth out at that complex. When we have youth on the adult fields, they're sized for adults, so we put temporary fences up, and we work with SPSA on that to shorten up the outfield fence to allow the youth on it. Other than that, those fences come out, and then the adults can play on it. So there's always been talk about a 4th field, and given today's kind of playing environment, a 4th field being smaller than the current fields that are out there. Additionally, there's always been talk, as you look at the parking lot, it serves the sculpture park as well. Is it going to be resurfaced someday? Is it going to be actually replaced? If we did do something with a new field, how would it fit? What kind of stalls would be touched up or impacted? And then in our current capital budget, we do have a line item held for future light replacement out there. We have wood poles, the old halogen bulbs out there. We are repairing them, but we're looking at an LED light upgrade eventually along those lines. There's more. SPSA certainly has a list. Other user groups have a list, but these were the big items that have been kind of over and over coming up. At that point, when we identified that, we met with SPSA first, had a conversation, and we identified that if we built a field on the existing land, because the park is surrounded by wetland, we own a lot of land there, but most of it's wetland, it's going to impact the parking significantly. And the only neighbor, or the only area that would ever be considered for expansion if there was ever an opportunity, was the Moose Lodge. So before we got into really dreaming, which is a lot of times what you're doing in the planning, we said it was time to talk to the Moose Lodge and just see, is it even a possibility? Because if it's a non-starter, it doesn't pay to be having the discussion we're having tonight. And the Moose Lodge met with us a couple different times and ultimately said, hey, we've seen enough and heard enough that we'd like to explore what a letter of intent would be, not spending money, not finalizing everything now, but of how it could come to be when the time lined up to do a field expansion or to expand the park. And we had to get something on paper to really determine what the impact to them would be. So the next slide is going to show you what that impact would ultimately potentially be. And the Moose Lodge has come back to us and responded via email saying, hey, we're supportive of continuing these discussions. We'd like to go to this letter of intent. That's not something I'm authorized to do, right? So at this point, we just talked about master planning, which is why it's here, and I'm going to be asking you for kind of the direction on this. This is the photo of the existing facility as it sits today. So here's the 3 fields. Obviously, there's the interstate. You have 2nd Street North to the west. And you'll see the 3 300-foot size fields with the turf infields. And then you can see the Moose Lodge property. The way it sits today, our lots are segregated. There's a row of trees that go between them. They have a gravel lot that attaches to their asphalt. Our lot runs east and west. And this lot serves more than just Zenoff Park. It also serves as a sculpture park entrance on that north side. Again, when we started talking, we just determined there is a significant number of days and months in which we're not using the park, and that parking lot certainly can be overflow, and there's certainly park users that park where they don't belong on the Moose side of the property too. So there's already been kind of, users moving around in that complex. So this is where we ultimately kind of put the first pen to paper to say, is it even an idea? Things that were talked about and just in really bare bones principle with Moose, and certainly we have to dial it in further, was just, do you have any challenges? Are you planning to do any major upgrades in terms of parking lots or things of that nature? And certainly they recognize if they were to replace their lot, they'd hate to tear something out if we wanted to do something in the future, and vice versa, we would too. So ultimately what this shows would be a shared lot. It's not really been defined any further than that, right? We could talk about who owns it, if there's a property swap, or how that would work. And you could see that the corner of this new field could potentially sit on a portion of their property. I mentioned that this is just a plan, and the plan would certainly be showing something not on city land today either. So that really leads to this next really question, and where I'll stop talking about Zenoff, is staff, we're authorized to move with the master plan. So I'm seeking direction from all of you just to say, are you comfortable with the idea of another field or field someday in this plan? And if you are, I think in order to do that, I recommend we continue to engage with the Moose Lodge to identify terms that it could be possible. We'd be doing that while we're not adopting a plan. Obviously, if that terms came back to you all in the city and we said those terms aren't what we want and it didn't work out, or the Moose didn't feel comfortable, we wouldn't have a plan on file that's not possible. But if we're doing that at the same period of time, again, not monetarily, we can end up with a plan adopted and this letter of intent that could be executed in the future. So what I'm looking for today is if we're on the right track, if you're comfortable with what we're talking about so far. I skimmed over the size of that field. I will mention to you that there is more conversations in terms of user groups. So we do rent the fields to the high schools when they need to play on them or they can't play in Plover. We certainly would be talking to them about if a field that size would aid them with their operations. We also want to talk to both youth organizations, softball and baseball, and find out what would allow them to do for tournaments and things of that nature. One thing that, as a director, I'm fearful of is we certainly don't want to build a complex that makes all of the rest of our ball diamonds sit empty and go to disrepair. So the idea here would be to try to set something up where SPSA can continue to operate their operations as best as possible, and that tournaments can still be in some of our ball diamonds and things that we have, but they would have that complex idea, but that we don't let the rest of the parks go to disrepair and not just get used. That really we're adding more flexibility and more homes to, you know, a complex, but that there's still an understanding that if we go forward with that in the future, we want the other diamonds still used too. So certainly that's logistical questions for later, but I do just want to mention that. So the two things I'm really looking for tonight, and any questions you have, is this sound okay the way we're headed right now? And would you be comfortable or authorizing me to continue forward with really that letter of intent discussion with the Moose? I do believe we've got a few Moose Lodge members in the back, so if there's anything I didn't say accurately, certainly, Mr. Chair, if you want to recognize them, and I'm all ears here for questions.
All right, thanks, Dan. Let's open it up to the commission. Any comments, questions?
I have a comment. Well, kind of just what Dan said with tournaments. So on the youth side, the adult side, softball is coming back as a whole. A report was done. I think adult softball has grown 6% in the last couple of years. But on the youth side, youth girls, youth boys, their tournaments are getting bigger and bigger. And the age groups are getting, I mean, there's 8U tournaments now. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, there wasn't an 8U division. So I think instead of doing one diamond, you need to look at two. If you're going to do it the right way and make it complex. Because it also lets you bring in some big national tournaments from USA Softball and other organizations. And to be able to have a 5-diamond complex will help and aid in that.
I guess I have a question. Matt, could you give ballparks on what that economic impact could be with a five diamond? I don't know, I'm asking you to kind of pull a number out of here, but.
If you brought in, so with 5 diamonds, and you run a national tournament that has maybe 40 teams, 50 teams, that's 12 to 14 girls a team. Plus, at the girls' side, it's mom and dad, both grandma and grandpas, siblings. I mean, I don't know how you tell how much money comes in, but our hotels would be full. It would be packed, a packed house.
Can I just one question?
Sure.
So just to make sure I clarify, so if we were to talk about, say, a 5th diamond, are you saying along the lines of asking about, you know, for example, a first right of refusal or something if the Moose was ever to move?
Yep.
Or are you talking about like impacting the parking lot idea?
Or no, even just if as we go forward now, I mean, if we were to purchase the Moose property, find another place for the Moose to move to, something of that nature that you can, if we're going to start, I mean, I would assume to add 2 diamonds now is cheaper than to add a diamond now and then a diamond in 5 or 6 years or something of that nature.
So because we're talking planning, so typically I think what we'd be talking about, if that was the case, certainly I'm just asking, is we would most likely then talk about in that letter of intent, because again, we wouldn't be acquiring property now anyways, it would be part of the future discussion. If the commission wanted that explored, I certainly could, you know, talk to their members, you know, to the members that we're working with and say, if we do this letter of intent, you know, what would be the second phase or something too, if you ever thought. Okay.
All right, thanks.
I just, is there sufficient space there in that Moose property for 2 diamonds to add?
Yeah, if you, I mean, when you look at it, you'd have to kind of, you would move some things around, like this is already taking out the pavilion. You might have to move the office building that's on the other side. I mean, if it fits, and you wouldn't have necessarily a rectangle parking lot, I don't think. You'd have more of a rectangle with a triangle, I think, but it does fit. It just kind of have to jimmy around a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. All right, anybody else? Yes,
The
go
other
ahead.
thing, do we still have that, remember that used to be that old driving range? We still have that land back there too?
That's the sculpture park. And
Well, not all of it's sculpture though, is it?
no, it's not. But so I can tell you that if you look at the aerial imagery, the defined wetland boundary is at the edge of the lot. So essentially south of that, you know, there's basically there, you can't impact.
It wouldn't be usable?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Especially for like anything that's habitable. So buildings, you know, some of those permanent amenities. The trail was allowable with the sculpture park. That's why it was a really great use, because it wasn't impactful. But when you start, like you're talking about grading plans and concrete, things of that nature.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add? All right, being none.
So I guess just to make sure I've got it for Park Commission, so everyone would be comfortable then if we move forward with the conversations of letter of intent. Again, terms and things would be coming back to this board for feedback on, as well as exploring and asking if the Moose Lodge would ever consider it within that letter of intent, the future usage of their building, should they not use it, or if they choose to sell it or something someday. Is that what we're looking for?
I agree, yes.
Okay. Do you want to ask Moose if there's anything you want to add?
I guess anybody from the community would like to speak on this issue? From the Moose or anybody?
Actually, I'm the vice president of the Moose.
Please, yeah, just state your name and address.
Sorry, I'm the vice president of the Moose Lodge. Mike is detained right now, so he's the president, and I'm authorized to say we're willing to move forward with this.
Okay.
Okay?
What is your name?
Ed Prokop,
thank you.
P-R-O-K-O-P.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the community? Any questions, comments? All right.
Okay, so again, so what I'll do here then is we'll basically, we'll have those meetings and then probably tweak drawings, and then certainly they'll be coming back to the commission at that point. Okay, if you're good, I'll move right into Goerke.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, very similar format here on the Goerke Park as you saw. So on Goerke Park, I'll tell you, as you know, we did submit for a grant application, which we were unsuccessful for through the FEMA BRIC program for what the police department, forestry, storm shelter, garage, which you'll see on the drawing. That is also still under consideration for the congressional spending. So Senator Baldwin's office, while we were under consideration for the FEMA grant, pulled that project and did submit it. And we're told, we believe we should hear something or potentially hear something here before the end of the year. But we've not gotten a tangent timeline. What they've said is we've cleared the state, it's into the federal congressional spending, and certainly there's a lot of moving pieces to federal spending. So that part is in a place where if funding lines up, the council would be discussing then the local matches and things that would go with that. The Aquatic Center, as you saw from everything today, the pool has been here a long time, and our comprehensive outdoor rec plan talked over and over again about, updates to it, replacement of it, what it looks like. So that's been an opportunity that we've been talking about a lot as we've run into capital budget items. As you saw, we spent about $360,000 here the last decade. We're going to have another, investment here soon, and then we annually budget for it. So that's another item that we know was something that needs to be sorted out in the long-term future for Goerke Park. The other thing is the Boys and Girls Club has been a great neighbor. They've been in the park, I think, since 2014, 13, and there's different times they've considered and had conversations with us. They use our meeting rooms sometimes when they have trainings and things that go on, and we certainly are aware as we started to talk about the relocation of Park Rec and Forestry offices into this building, if we do the garage, that would open up potentially space on the side of the gymnasium that is currently used for my team as well as our forestry garage. So we immediately wanted to talk to them, too, to say, is that a reality? Is it something you're still interested in? In the drawing, I'll mention to you, they currently have a first right of refusal on that area if another entity was to make an offer to the city and we vacate it. So, case in point, Big Brothers Big Sisters or YMCA or anybody came to the city and said, hey, we see you're building this building. We would like to move into your old building. In the original agreement with Boys and Girls Club, that was included because they knew, too, they didn't know what the future would hold. So we've talked with them, and we know that they have some interest in different things for their operations and collaboration. So that's been an opportunity that we would like to define within this Goerke plan, too. As you know, there was a house purchased along Prais Street in this last year, and in the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, it calls for if there's other opportunities that present themselves, the city would evaluate it. So staff also knows that is the access from Prais Street something that needs to be, how is it going to be incorporated if we look at a master plan, as well as if there's impact to the police department and things of that nature. There is lots more. We have a lot of user groups. We have lots of neighbors. I think we even have, several of us here are going to be here tonight. There's a lot more of different moving pieces with all the athletics that happen in Goerke Park, that this list is going to be big in this park, certainly by the time we get further along. What we did to start is we set up some meetings. So we met with the Boys and Girls Club. We have had different meetings throughout the last several months and even a couple of years. They did have a change in executive director there. Actually, I see Meg Earler's here tonight, the current president. And we wanted to talk to him just to say, hey, is there a collaboration effort that we could potentially talk about as we're laying into this plan? Certainly, they have different avenues and things that they're working through. We've also talked with the Boys and Girls Club about the use of the aquatic center, our current pool. So we do, a large user of the pool is the Boys and Girls Club. So we talked about as those, improvements come up, rather than maybe 3 different things happening at different times, is there collaboration efforts that can participate or, be a part of it together? And I did include the text that we've kind of landed on with the Boys and Girls Club is that they're willing to continue to talk with us, and they want to see, if there's opportunities for them to basically, serve their mission as well as, serve the city as a whole, and see if we can all kind of benefit as working together. So just to read it word for word for those of you that might not have read the packet, their response was, discussions have been high level that included a concept where the Boys and Girls Club would potentially partner on future developments within the park, such as an aquatic center, new and enhanced basketball courts, and other improvements. Our goal is to work together to enhance the community by expanding our presence in the Goerke Park area and offering more safe and engaging after-school programs and activities for teens, tweens, and elementary school students in the Stevens Point community. So we started talking to them to say, hey, if we do the steps, where does that go? And obviously they're here tonight too because they've been really engaged and been really good, in our conversing stage at this point. Again, I call them one of the big checkers on the checkerboard here as we start to look at Goerke Park. This is the aerial image. We're obviously sitting in Goerke Park today, but as you took and look and you can see, I don't have the cursor, but I call it the gymnasium, and the Boys and Girls Club and the PD is kind of that top left corner. And right now, the Park Rec and Forestry Administration, we're in that west wing that heads kind of southwest, and then all of our forestry operation equipment is in that kind of east wing that heads towards the tennis courts. There's also a bullpen area there that we keep, several trucks and things in that we're working with our staff. The next drawing is kind of some of the first pieces. So if you look at the police department, which we're in currently, you can see the floor plan of what's been submitted for that grant funding, congressional spending, of what a future PD forestry garage would be, as well as a storm shelter for this corridor of the city. The grayed out area attached to it is just through these walls over here. Currently, the Boys and Girls Club is leasing that space from the city. There's 4 classrooms over there and kind of a break room area. The way that grant was packaged up was that if the funding came through, the garage would be constructed if council okayed the local match, and then Park Rec and Forestry offices would move into those classrooms and be remodeled, which would therefore open up the 2 wings in the rec center. The gymnasium is owned by the city but shared with the Boys and Girls Club. So by contract, they use it during their operations during the day or in the summer. We rent it at night. We do generate between usually $12,000 and $15,000 a year in rental. And we have significant daytime free programming during the school year with pickleball and also adult basketball leagues, homeschool organizations, sometimes CAP services, others that will bring different groups in the gym, and that's free during the day. So there's certainly a huge element of it being kind of the only community gym not tied to the school district. But it's labeled on this drawing as kind of a bubble saying first right of refusal area. Certainly the city owns it, so in the master planning process, if there was a park amenity that we said this is the perfect place for it, that's under the purview of the Park Commission and Council to say, hey, we're going to look at that. But as we talk about collaboration and kind of park improvements, one of the big items I'm going to talk about in the next slide is, there's some practicality here and some really good opportunities if we continue the discussions to say, as we do other upgrades, could the Boys and Girls Club utilize that area, and could we mutually benefit the whole community, not only the kids, but the park as a whole, certainly seeing that other improvements in the park could certainly serve their participants too, like they do today. So what you see here in the drawing is just bubbles, because we do not have an aquatic center size placed yet, but it was to show kind of a visual aid that if we replace a pool, it's unlikely to be the size it is today. It's most likely going to, even if it's just a pool and then splash pad features, the footprint will be bigger. In the concept report that we put, the condition report, 10,000 square feet was used in comparison to around 5,500 square feet. So we can definitely define that a little further, but we wanted to show that if we tore the one down where it sits today, it's likely going to impact either east and west more or north and south more. Then we wanted to plunk the pieces that we knew in terms of the future garage addition and then the Boys and Girls Club first right of refusal area. We also shaded out the house that the city currently owns on Prais Street, and the reason for that is to show that there's a house there today and that it's owned by the city, and looking to basically ultimately say another big decision that needs to be made over this process is if access off of Prais Street is going to be incorporated. As you can imagine, one home, we are going to rent on that house here very soon. If it's drawn, they would have to be drawn probably in a different manner. We're looking at setback requirements. Does it line up with, the intersection or whatever? The commission wanted to kind of point that direction. But as we look ahead here, what I'm asking for from Park Commission, as I roll down here, is that in Goerke Park, I'm authorized to begin this master plan process. But very similar, I'm looking for some final direction here as we move to a more developed rendering. Number one, are you all comfortable with the aquatic center or a future redesign of a pool staying in Goerke Park in a bigger footprint? The current location would be examined, but I also believe we need to examine moving it closer to Main Street or looking if it should go in another more visible space. talking with, one of our user groups like the school district about if the parking lot could serve football, maybe drop off traffic, all that type of things if it was slid closer to the road. Again, these are just thoughts. We have to look at it, obviously, if you're comfortable with that. Also, the Prais Street part, are we going to do the access? I know Chief Cuso is going to want to say a few words here tonight, too, just about what they believe it'll help with their operations if we do it, in addition to it be another access point to the park. But ultimately, I'm at a point, I'd like to know if you want it on paper and if we're going to proceed with that. Thirdly, working with the Boys and Girls Club, again, how our preliminary conversations have talked about is, can we mutually perform something where it's not just one or the other? Is it where we, if we say they couldn't build in Goerke Park, for example, and we prove a bunch of other facilities, and they're just, bursting at the seams, they could suffer. In addition, if, we have everything in the park fall or crumble and it doesn't get improved, but we have the best Boys and Girls Club facility ever in the middle of the park, is that the best for the park system, a community-wide park in the city? So preliminary, what we talked about is if we continue forward with the master plan, showing that space is available to them potentially before we adopt it, with us moving Park Rec and Forestry, we believe there'd be a collaboration piece to it that would be some other improvements mutually. Terms, conditions, we have to sort all that out after planning phase. And even if something goes on a plan, doesn't mean that the Aquatic Center gets built next year. It doesn't mean that necessarily an improvement happens, but we wanted to kind of outline that space. So that's what I'm looking for to start here tonight, is basically feedback on those three big pieces: the Aquatic Center, the access being drawn from Prais Street, and continuing forward with kind of Boys and Girls Club's opportunity at that space. After I have that direction tonight, certainly there's a lot of feedback that needs to be gained, but we do need to move towards the Parker Building and what happens with that area, which is down along Main Street. The ice rink, the actual hockey rink outside, that with the way our winters have been, has been getting more limited usage too, as well as getting into the shot put and discus area, and overflow parking and things that go on there too. So with that, I can answer any questions that I can, and certainly all ears here again.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, you've been quite busy with this. So again, we'll open this up to the board, and any comments, questions, and go ahead, Liz.
Dan, the current users of the gym, would they still have access to a facility if the Boys and Girls Club were to take that over?
Yeah, so if we were to continue on the road we're going, again, we've talked about saying it would have to be a community gym. So before the city would tear down or allow a tear down or a remodel or a changeover of our current gym, we'd want to negotiate into the terms that the new gym, if one was to be proposed, would continue to have access for the community during the daytime when they're not using it. And certainly, the plan would not even include that right now. Let's say we adopt a plan that shows a footprint. That would be part of an agreement stage. So it would leave both parties the ability to walk away, essentially, before something's done. But my belief is that I would always recommend to Park Commission and Council that we would never give that term up, because that gym has served our community for a very long time. And our users, we're growing. Pickleball's growth, I can't believe how many people come through our door each week for pickleball during the day, in addition to basketball. And they've actually asked for lines and improvements. So I think that need's going to continue to be there for the community.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? I guess as a senior member on this commission, many years that I've been here discussing many of these same things when Boys and Girls Club came here, the future of that, and the swimming pool. Obviously, we were brought up to speed with that again tonight and what needs to be done. So I think this hits all the spots we're looking at. So, all right. Let's open up to the community. Go ahead.
I don't necessarily know that if making an access to this park off of Prais Street is a good idea. I think if you made access, a private access to the garage, the PD, I don't know that I would be in favor of. I mean, it's a little community over there. I mean, that whole area is. And I think putting a driveway in the middle of it to Goerke Park is going to disrupt that area.
Yes, just to clarify, though, that's part of the exploration process. We could very well come back. So I know, Matt, you've got concerns about it. You live in that neighborhood. But at this point, what we're hoping, I think that's part of the process, because there is a community safety need from the police department. Chief Cuso, I know you've talked about that, or could talk about that a little bit. So I don't know that we want to exclude it at this point as part of this discovery phase.
Agreed.
Right. Bob Cuso, Chief of Police here for the Stevens Point Police Department, 933 Michigan. I would agree. It's a planning phase, exploration. I will tell you, it's been a blessing in 2017 to move out of the bottom of the courthouse to this building. And we knew that there'd be some challenges. We didn't understand how big of a challenge it would be for traffic flow. Our officers on a critical call at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, cannot get out of here. We've had officers actually, some of our detectives actually change their hours of operation because they can't even back their squads out at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock because of the traffic from PJs that comes through here. So the only thing I would recommend is the more access points, the better for us. And we understood the hardships, especially when there's events like hockey games. But any type of access point that can decrease the amount of time it takes for vehicles to get out of the parking lot would be tremendously helpful for us. So again, I know this is the exploration phase. I definitely think it should be part of that.
Thank you, Chief. All right, anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just think there's the opportunity for so much mutual benefit here. I mean, efficiencies for the city in combining departments and making things more efficient, improvements and benefits to the Boys and Girls Club in terms of condensing and expanding their operations. I mean, PJ Jacobs has issues with traffic circulation now. So I just think there's a way that all of these pieces could really work together to lead to larger community improvements that affect a lot of organizations, a lot of students, a lot of residents. So yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting to see that possibility, those possibilities open up.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah, so I see noted in, I think it's item 1, potential to move the aquatic center further south. Is that something that's been discussed any more than a concept, or what? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, so actually this is, and I can't remember which conversation I was in, but I had someone pose the thought to me of if we, for example, were to remove the current pool, and if we moved the 2 ball diamonds or made a turf field up where it currently is now, if the pool was slid really more visibly to the roadway, and imagine some sort of parking lot that came off of Main Street, if permitting would allow it. The pool doesn't operate during the school season. So essentially that parking lot could be another drop-off instead of the really congested drop-off that happens on Michigan. Now, I can't speak for the school district. They might say, heck no, right? But this was something that was pitched off of staff, as if could that serve that? Additionally, Friday nights and Saturdays, when there's a football game, this entire area outside the football field is just jam-packed, but no one's able to really park in the ball diamonds. Obviously, we use it for athletics, but if a parking lot was to be hugged up in there, it could serve weekend and evening events too, even the Willett Arena and stuff of that nature. Because if you come down here anytime, 30 hockey games a year, obviously there's usually 15 or 16 varsity or collegiate games. The traffic is everywhere. It's really congested. So that was the idea. It was just kind of, hey, it could go down there. Certainly it would involve infrastructure. We'd have to have supply lines in a new building. But when we start talking about the money for the demo and a reconstruction of an aquatic center, that's the relocation would probably be the lesser of the cost. So, but certainly things that'll be weighed in that if we do go down that road. If tonight Park Commission says we do want to look at that little bigger footprint and let's check some different locations, we would talk to PJs and the school district first to say, do you think that could work for you? Because we don't want to displace their FIAD program. So by contract with the school district, when we did the big project in the stadium, we did basically memorialize that they can have their FIAD programs on parkland. Actually, a lot of folks in the community don't realize the city owns all that. Just the building in their small parking lot is the school district. So they're very reliant on Goerke serving their FIAD program. So that would be as far as, we haven't gotten any further than I've had it mentioned to me once or twice is what about moving it up? And we also get a lot of people that come from out of town that say, where was your pool? Or I struggled to find it behind the buildings. And if it was closer to the main road, it'd be a big visual attraction too.
Yeah, I only asked that because I was in that kind of group as well. Like, oh, it's back here. I've only been here 4 years, so finding it was a gem, but it was hard to find.
Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know this is all exploratory, early phase discussion, but our discussion in the pool, around the pool earlier, was kind of more focused on what immediate repairs over the next couple of years might look like. And I see here in this plan, like, we do have that bigger footprint for what a future rebuild of that facility would be like. And I'm just wondering, if we move forward with this plan tonight, how much does that sort of tacitly commit us to rebuilding this facility in the next 5 to 10 years versus continuing to make those
that's a great question. I don't think actually would commit a timeline at all. I think really what the plan's probably going to develop first and foremost is going to be, most of this hinges on that garage and office relocation, because if that doesn't happen, the Park Rec and Forestry and the Forestry wing really stays put, because we operate that facility and that's our main location. So, when the plan is done, what I would see as happening, and kind of the best guess, is we'd have to go into a phasing discussion. And right now, even in our conversation, we said phase 1 is really the PD garage and Forestry garage to free up the other space. Phase 2 is when the pool gets to a failure, the city's going to have to plan to say we're either rebuilding it or putting a bunch of money in this facility or the bigger one. And then from there, it's going to really be based on collaboration, right? So if we do a turf field, it's going to be based on our user groups and our funding mechanisms. So I think what it would really do if we did find, let's say we came up with a plan and we slid that out to Main Street, is we would not put any money into the ball diamonds, big money, in the future, because we know eventually we're going to be taking them out or moving them. So it would basically stop the city from throwing good money before bad, right? And that's kind of the idea. But really the phasing sequence, and it doesn't actually say we have to put it there, but it would point, really say that's probably where we're going once we do a reconstruction. So, but the impact to users too is as we're doing construction, as you can imagine, for us to move Park Rec and Forestry offices too, this is getting in the weeds, but Boys and Girls Club has to leave that space, and we don't want to kick them out or anything either. So we'd have to really get into those weeds. But first, we want to identify all the partners and how it works and impacts.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for sharing. All right, anybody else? All right, let's open up to the community. Anybody have any comments?
Oh, that's bigger.
A lot of stuff crammed into a small area.
So I'm Meg Erler. I'm actually a resident of Stevens Point, 3233 Leahy. I'm also currently the president of the Boys and Girls Club. So we were able to meet with Dan last Friday and really take a look at exactly what you guys are taking a look at. And I can tell you that about a year ago, Boys and Girls Club actually had an architect draw up for us a proposed plan for that area. What it included was a two-story, well, also basement, that would support and house an expanded teen center for the community. We already have our teen center operating in our existing building, but we're just seeing a lot more demand from the community. And we were getting slammed by teens, which is great, because it's a safe place, it's a fun place, And so that was part of it. The other part was actually looking at the reality that we could put 2 regulation-sized basketball courts in that space, both to support our Boys and Girls Club, definitely support the community with what is currently there, but an upgraded facility, also potentially the school district, and we see this as really an opportunity. At the time, we had some conversations with the city. We were in a little bit kind of feeling like we really needed to get this moving for our teens and for our community. And with the grant operation happening, the timeline was just a little bit up in the air. We have been very fortunate. We recently received a grant, relatively sizable, that has allowed us to expand our programming to a 3rd elementary school in town, Madison Elementary. That has somewhat relieved the kind of number of kids that we're looking at having in our building, our elementary, our junior high, our teens, especially during that after-school time and summertime. So, as we said to Dan, we've got some breathing space to be able to really see if this would work out for our community. Because ultimately what we're talking about here with a Park and Rec and with a Boys and Girls Club is providing opportunities for youth and families and community. So we're really excited to be hearing about this and are interested in moving forward with conversation. I'm going to take my Boys and Girls hat off, and I'm going to put my school board hat on because I'm on the school board. I can't speak on behalf of the school board, but I can speak as an individual member of the school board, and just recognize the wonderful partnership that we have had with the city forever, and our ability over the course of the last, frankly, 4 or 5 years to work through some wonderful projects. Emerson Park, we got it from the city for $1, and we gave it back to the city for $1. Jefferson School, McKinley, Washington School. I mean, we've really done some wonderful things again for the community in collaboration, and I have no doubt at all that the school district will be open to having conversations as well. So I can't speak for everybody, but I'm just putting it out there that we do have a history and a tradition of that. So thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Andy Hoff, last name Hoff. Excuse me, I live at 2601 Prais Street, right here. And my first question is this the final kind of rendering of what is proposed for the Goerke Park field? I'm sorry, the Willett Field. Is that kind of it? The reason I ask that is because my house, the highlighted house, I live 4 doors to the east, which was in the proposed property acquisition plan, the Corp, for expansion or whatever. So I'm just wondering, are we going to see a bigger, broader plan that involves what it looks like with those houses being acquired by the Parks Department? Because as it stands, I'm good. I'm okay with that. But if you remember in 2007, that where the aquatic center was going to be a parking lot, right? For Goerke Park, that was going to be a parking lot. What if that would have became a parking lot? We'd have to dig up a parking lot to put an aquatic center there. So it's mindful to think of what can happen there that could be a mistake. Very similar to a parking lot where that field is now, where I'll tell you that kids all day, every day, all 4 seasons play in that field.
You're referring to the Willett Field there?
The Willett Field.
Right.
Yep, the Willett Field.
Back of your house there.
That is correct. I live 4 doors to the right of the house that was already purchased, right where Clayton kind of meets Prais Street. I live about 11 o'clock right there. So right in the middle of that proposed property acquisition area is my house, where I live, raise my children, have supper. So a different spot for the splash pad? Sure. We're behind the times. I mean, you look at Marshfield, Rapids, Wausau. Their splash pads are amazing. They're super nice. We don't have one. I get it. I get it. And I don't hate the idea of it being there, but I do have a tremendous amount of disdain that my house is in a property acquisition area for anything. I don't care what it is. It's my house. So I'll leave you with this. I live at 2601 Prais Street, and I am not selling my house. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Kathy Chisel. I live at 2525 Prais Street, which is east of the property that was just bought. One of the concerns I guess I have, before it was even bought, is people already walking through the yard. What's going to happen, and I understand with the police, I get it at 7 and 3 because I live on Prais and I can't even get out of my driveway. So that might not be the answer either, because you're going to sit there, now all these cars, unless you have the lights on and you can go, which is great. But what is going to stop people? Is there going to be a barrier in between? Is there going to be a fence so that I don't have to see cars coming through or people walking through, or what's going to happen? I guess that's what I would like to put to everybody to discuss that piece. And I know there's going to be more discussion on this. So I guess I'll just leave it as that.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? All right, being done, I guess
let me just recap here. So,
Yeah.
so what I've got so far here is the Park Commission, if you're comfortable, we'd be looking at a bigger footprinted, again, we'll further define that, but aquatic center / pool, maybe in a couple different locations within inside the Goerke Park itself. We would leave the bubble and probably maybe work with Boys and Girls Club if they actually had some sort of footprint. They might have something from before to kind of place it where current Park Rec and Forestry facility sits in case that is vacated in the future. Obviously, the garage and relocation of the offices would stay. And then, am I hearing we will continue forward with exploration of the driveway off of Prais Street, probably in maybe a couple locations with things like the fencing and access or barriers incorporated on that drawing? And the reason I'm going to clarify, especially on the Prais Street side, is the grid system style conversations that come up, right, is you do see Clayton, right, that's over there. Our court plan says strategic acquisition. What that just basically means is if a for sale sign goes up, the city looks, right? There's no eminent domain here. There's no way of buying. There's no letters going out to buy. But if we do draw something where a house sits, all it would be is a drawing until if and when someday it went for sale and the city acquired it. So there's a couple options on that. Is it could be drawn, in the house that's purchased now, looking at things like the setbacks, fencing and barriers, or it could be drawn in the strategic acquisition area to say if and when it ever came to be, this is where we'd like it to be. Anyone feel strongly on that today, or would you like to see it both ways, or maybe three ways, one without a driveway at all, one with a driveway where it currently is, where the house has been purchased, and one with if we, somehow acquired 2 or 3 more or something over the next 50 years or something like that?
I think the three options is better.
I agree.
Gives people more visuals to look at and decide.
So just to make sure I have it then, so the Prais Street access would be shown maybe up to 3 ways, alignment not there at all, and maybe aligned currently the way we have property. Aquatic Center will be shown larger and in multiple locations. Boys and Girls Club first right of refusal area, maybe a bubble that's a little closer to a footprint, stays on the drawing, and then we would move forward with those updates and then looking at the southern half of the park. Is everyone good with that kind of direction today? Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything I'm missing from the residents in terms of the screening and things? Okay.
I tell you, Dan, I appreciate the extra time and effort of all of you to have multiple options of different ideas. That is much appreciated, personally.
Yes, Liz?
Dan, maybe you could address the fact that city has had its eye on some other properties adjacent to another park, and they've been on the drawing board for many, many years, and we've only gotten one of those properties. That was when that came up for sale.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So for those that might not know, there was a Riverfront acquisition plan that I think the last updated adopt version was 93. It is part of our corp plan because we've had it around since prior to that. But that's how, essentially, if you remember across from Piffner Pioneer Park, and I'm going to get the name wrong. Tom Schrader used to remember the names of who we bought them from, but there's a little sliver we use for overflow parking for Riverfront Rendezvous, abutting the WPS site. I guess there was a home there at one time. That was something that was acquired through that strategic plan that said if it came up, the city would like it. There's a triangle where I believe that's Franklin, does that sound right, where it heads into the bathroom? The triangle there, too, is one that was on that plan that did come up and the city acquired it. There's a house at the end of Franklin Street by the boat landing, and that was purchased as part of that plan because someday if the boat landing was redone, it would give access. There is several others in that plan, adjacent to Bucol Park and other areas of the city that said, again, it's strategic acquisition if there's opportunities. I'll tell you one that didn't go our way. If you look at the very nice house in Bucol Park, that's on the plan, and someone else bought it, and then the house was actually updated. So there is a number of areas around some of the parks, those three riverfront parks primarily, that we have had strategic acquisition listed for going on about 35 to 40 years. And there's one home that's been acquired, and there's a couple parcels that came up as houses were demoed. So that doesn't make any, I could get it. If my house is on a plan, I totally understand. But I do just want to let everybody know that these are kind of long-term forecasting documents, as well as so that if there's opportunities, the city doesn't say, well, we never talked about it. But there's been instances too where something comes for sale and the city doesn't acquire it just because of either cost or it didn't line up with what they do with plans. So certainly we welcome the feedback, and all of you will be invited to more conversations. We want to land somewhere where we do have estimates on coming through the park with cell phone data. The school and the PD can't be shared, like they don't give that to us, but the latest estimate we had from last year was 240,000 that came through the park without those two. So if you add those two on top, obviously it's significantly higher. So it isn't unusual for us to be looking at some of the longer term plans for some of these areas, but we certainly want to be sensitive that there isn't eminent domain for parks. We don't do that. That's roadway improvement type stuff. All we do is say if there's opportunities, we'll talk about it, and then essentially from there, the city can exercise an option if they have time. In today's real estate market, sometimes they sell the same day, so that's not possible, but that's what that document will lead to your question. And the last one was 1993 that was very thoroughly went through. So.
Great, thanks, Liz. Yeah. Again, thank you everybody for participating. We really value your comments. So, all right. So next item is number 6, the 2025 fees and charges for the Parks and Rec Forestry Department.
Okay, so this is just a slightly different format this year. If you remember, we used to forecast out 5 years quite frequently, and to all of your credit, last year we started talking about, like, well, when was the last time we updated it? And we didn't have all the documents, so we reworked this form to show the last year that we touched a fee, essentially. So what you're seeing here is 2024 approved pricing for the different various items we charge for, and then right now I actually do not show an increase in 25, other than we do increase the wages. So when we do things for the stadium or we do things in the Willet where we're charging for a facility with staff there, because wages go up every year, you'll see it says plus wage increase. So our rental rates would be the same, and then we'll add that wage increase on it, and that was direction from all of you last year. Right now, I have not been directed from the comptroller's office that we have to increase revenue by a certain percentage or anything of that nature. So really, this comes back to the arms of the Park Commission here. If you would like us to examine any sort of key area, if you want to see a certain percentage, we can go any which direction. Last year, just to refresh everybody's memory, the Park Commission said they wanted to maintain that the swimming pool and the Willet was absolutely as affordable as possible, so we left those things flat. We have been revisiting things like the boat slips and stuff quite frequently. Our revenue projections, which is great, we've been actually exceeding them in lodge rentals and gym rentals. Again, our online footprint, I give a lot of credit to the team. They've been doing a lot of advertising through social media marketing and things. We are renting a lot. You know, our lodges, Piffner Building, they're booked out all year, like next year already. So it's not a demand thing. We certainly have a demand. So now I would just look from direction from all of you. If you'd like me to explore any increases, we can do it. Otherwise, you see before you basically a proposed fees the same as 24 minus the wage increases. Yes, Liz?
Dan, did you say that we already have lodges rented out for next year?
Yeah, so our lodges are on a year-and-a-half basis.
Okay.
So if you remember pre-online system, you used to have to call and you'd reserve it by phone, we'd write it down, and you could do that in the first of the year, and there was a huge line. We've transitioned when we got our system to always a year-and-a-half in advance. So yeah, the Piffner Building is rented every Friday, Saturday, Sunday already all of next year, and most of the Blue Colt as well. And we're into, I think, even like the Girl Scout Lodge is now starting to get picked up. So.
That tells me we should consider raising the rates, especially for non-residents.
Right.
I mean, really, people have weddings there all the time. Where can you rent a hall for a wedding? Mm-hmm. Or a lot of these other events, I think we should really look at those.
I can tell you, too, that Emily did a thorough analysis. We're running sometimes upwards of 50 to 55% non-residents, especially in like the Piffner Building. So certainly, there's certainly high non-resident rental rates on those lodges, too.
So, I mean, I would like to suggest that we look at that.
Mike?
I remember we discussed that a while back, and somebody said, well, you know what people are going to do? They just find a city resident and go reserve it.
Both
I think that's why we didn't do anything at the time.
You did create the non-resident rate for lodges, though. That happened, I think we're charging $50. Let me double check it here. We did, the Park Commission did put the non-resident rate in.
It's a $50.
On top of it, yep. So we did create that, I believe, 2 years ago, and it got raised last year to 50. Let me get to the right spot here. Sorry. The non-resident rental fee is $50. So it went from 25 and 23 when it was created to last year when you did the fees and charges to 50. But like I said, I'm sure some do, but we still have, like I said, sometimes 45, 50%. People don't really even flinch. In comparison to, like, you start getting into these, like the golf course, they're a couple $1,000s a day.
Sure.
So we're certainly affordable there. Now, it's not the same level of amenity. But yeah, we haven't had, actually, I thought we'd get a lot of complaints originally for the non-resident fee. We really don't. Those that have a connection to residents, I think it does happen where they say, oh, I'll come back, and somebody else rents it. But a lot of people just say, don't problem, just swipe the card and don't think nothing of it.
We should hope that people would be honest about it. I mean, basically.
Well, no.
I was just going to say, Commissioner McDowell, were you thinking like across the board, say a $25 per increase, or did you have a amount in mind? So right now for the Piffner building, we charge $275. That's kind of our top tier. Buchholz and the all-purpose lodge have been $250 per day, and then the Boy Scout Lodge is $225, and then the Girl Scout Lodge has been $100. And that's based on sometimes popularity as well as kind of size that they can hold.
Why don't we propose $25 additional for non-resident fee?
So that would so the non-resident fee is 50 on top of that, so you're saying 75 total for the non-resident? Okay, so just to make sure, we're talking about two things here. So even our residents would pay if it was $25 more per lodge, and the non-residents would be 25 more, or just 25 to non-residents, and that's it?
I think both.
Both.
But I think you have to do it effective 2026. If you're if you are already renting in at 25,
sure,
make it effective 26.
Great.
Good point.
So 26, we're talking a $25 per lodge increase and a $75 non-resident fee on top of that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You make that a motion for him?
Is there any others that might go before you? Okay. Is there anything else you want to incorporate?
Can I just play devil's advocate for a second? Are we just raising this purely out of supply and demand because we can? Is there a need to raise this?
I have not been asked by our budgeting office to generate more revenue. We have because of popularity, but I am not under an order or anything like that.
I guess that's just what gives me pause. It's like, why raise it just because we can? Because if they're booked, we see an opportunity to raise, get an extra $25 out of people. It just.
Well, we were saving money. Same thing with the boat slips. I mean, that was the issue before. We had a waiting list, so we kept raising that. So. Yes.
Dan, could you explain the fees and the funds that are raised through these lodge fees, like what sort of accounts these go in and what it's used for?
Yeah, great. So the lodge rentals are completely into the general fund. So I think we're right around 70,000 we generate in lodge rentals through the year. They dump into the general fund, which funds the overall city budget. So our budget, Park Rec and Forestry, is very large, obviously. So it's certainly supporting us directly, but it's not like a segregated fund where 70 goes in, it goes right back to Park and Rec. It's just 70 when it gets paid goes into the city's revenue for the year, and then that helps fund city operations. So, but because our budget is so large, I could definitely say it certainly 100% supports us. It's just not like a direct chain, right? So.
Okay.
In my understanding, obviously, the tax levy restricts what we're budgeting for expenses, but certainly when revenues are higher, it gives the comptroller a little more flexibility on some of the things they do at the year end of the budget. So, and again, last year we talked about this a little bit. There's really never been a directive necessarily, to my understanding, from the comptroller to say, hey, we're going 3% across the board, across all departments. Park Commission's always kind of reviewed it annually, and we've looked at it year in and year out. And the one that's been hit definitely several years in a row was boat slips because of the wait list and things. So, I'm certainly impartial. I think we could generate more revenue if we raise it. If we don't, we'll certainly continue to sell out. I don't think even $25 would change probably the demand. And, we will go any direction on this. It helps when I'm able to say Park Commission raised it, I will tell you, versus saying staff raised it individually. So.
Dan, how long has it been since we raised the rate? Sorry,
Nope, no problem. It has been 2002, hold on, I went past it.
23.
Okay.
Yeah, 23.
There was the same discussion last year that it was brought up that it's a large percentage non-residents.
Yeah.
And it's, again.
So it just went from 25 to 50 then the last time?
Last year it went from 25, which is newly created 2 years ago, to 50 last year.
I don't know that I have a concern with that, to be honest, for non-resident users who aren't paying taxes. And we haven't, I mean, at most, a $25 increase is about a 10% raise over the course of 3 years. I don't think that's, Sean, I appreciate your concern. I had the same kind of reaction, but we're not getting any more money from the state. And it doesn't feel like a $25 raise over the course of a 3-year period is astronomically out of line.
Agreed.
And I would also offer, just food for thought, even if we did do this the 1st of 25, which I would potentially offer to you all, those that are booking it would never know there was a change. We update our rates and then it's published. So essentially just the early birds would have gotten a slight discount, essentially. The nice part about not delaying the year is next fall, we'd be talking about how there's one about to go into implementation. It just gets a little clunky. I'm not saying we can't. I certainly can do whatever the commission wants, but I would just offer a thought if we do feel comfortable moving it up. It's really simple for us just to set in our system on the 1st of the year. It goes up, and we can just put a release out towards the end of the year saying, hey, there is new rates coming on the 1st of the year. So,
As somebody who's renting a lodge for a wedding coming up, even the county parks are more. This is a steal for what they provide.
My thought on the increase is paper goods have gone up, and that's all supplied. And we also have staff that goes in, even though you're supposed to clean them, staff still goes there the day after, whatever, to tidy them up. And those increases have gone up.
I think the 1st of the year makes sense. I mean, everyone kind of expects something to happen then, rather than happening in the middle of the year whenever it might happen to.
Would you like to revise your motion?
Certainly, yes, make it effective. Were we kind of discussing the 1st of 2025? Is that what?
2025.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
That's just for non-residents, correct?
For non-residents.
So I'll restate it. So the motion would be to increase lodge rentals by $25 and non-resident lodge rentals by $25 effective January 1st, 2025.
Yes.
Okay. I'll second. You have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
I have one question, Dan.
Yes, sir.
With the new stuff at Goerke, the turf games for varsity college, are those for incoming teams? Because isn't there part of a
Correct.
whole?
Yeah, great question. So actually, what that is we actually have like the Wolves football program. They pay the same rates that were negotiated into our contracts. So we're keeping the schedule current. And then the second reason is, even though they're getting it included, we're tracking it. Because someday the day is going to come where they say, we need to renew this contract, and this is usually what happens. Well, we don't think we quite got the value. We're able to go back and say, no, actually, we booked it out at our current rates. On that year, you had $38,000 in value. So that's why we're going to keep the schedule up to date. Because if for some reason, and I hope it never happens, but if the agreements fell apart in 15 years, we're not renegotiating from a rate from 15 years ago. So
No, because you have, under the baseball softball program, you have certain groups that use diamonds at no charge.
Oh, sure.
But that's not listed under the stuff for over there, for like SPASH and university and user groups.
Well, they have a separate contract. Those youth groups, that's really the only place it's been recorded other than separate motion action here. So if you would like that language, we could write it in like on the bottom of the football field and hockey rink, but just because they're separate, like we have 10-page actual documents with them, we haven't done it.
Okay. No biggie. I was just curious.
Yep, good question.
That's a good question.
All right. Item number 7, Director's Report.
Just real quickly, the 2517 Prais Street, the resident had until the 1st of the year, but she's actually moved out. So we are going to begin what I'm calling the cleanup phase first, which will be a number of things that were left as part of the agreement we're going to be disposing of, or maybe put a few things by the curb if it looks like there's some value for free. There's not a ton that we think will be that. And our goal is to hopefully have that on the market for rent by the 1st. We have walked it with Candlewood, who helps us with these. We believe the rent's going to range somewhere between $1,200 and $1,300, depending upon what the final cleanup product looks like. The things we have on the docket is paint. That's the biggest thing. We're going to be painting several rooms. There's a light fixture in the kitchen, I'll call it, or the dining room, I'll call it, that's like 4 feet off the ceiling. That's just not to date. We're going to end up putting a new fixture in. And then there's just a couple small items in terms of like a crack repair where the drywall had issues. After that, we're testing appliances, and then we intend to put it on the market. So
is our staff doing those repairs?
Yeah, it's going to be a winter project for us here. It's getting cold until we get to snow removal. So the timing is about right here as everyone comes back from deer hunting season. Everyone's off right now, but then we're going to try to put them into that daytime project as best we can. So worst case scenario, if it takes a little longer, it would be the 1st of February, but that's what we're looking for is January 1st. I did want to let everyone know that the 41st Riverfront Rendezvous is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th this year. Slightly different. We're actually doing Thursday night, like a half night, because everyone most likely will have the 4th off. All day on the 4th with the parade, because that worked well last year with an earlier parade, bringing people down, and then all day Saturday with the fireworks at night. By having the next day off after fireworks, when the weather's well, our crowds have been gangbuster. So that's our schedule here this year. I want to tell you the headliners, but we're not quite signed, so I'll tell you next time. Let's be signed. So
Give us a hint.
Yeah. I gotta look at your email. It's on the list. I'll have to check. And then just lastly, 25th capital budget has been approved. We do have the press box included, so you'll see that facade and the roof being redone. And then the cultural commons contaminant, if you remember, this has been a number of years ongoing, is in. So we're just about to get the kickoff for the relayout of that. I do want to get that in front of all of you. The DNR had to approve that plan, so it wasn't something that we got into the nuts and bolts of, but there'll be a cap, some fill material on top, as well as a bicycle pathway, we're calling it. Bikes aren't allowed in the cultural commons, so you'll go around the outside on a sidewalk as part of the cap. So once we have that drawn up a little better, I do want to get that in front of you. Our intention is to do that in the spring, and then that will get rid of that kind of direct contact that we've had where people have to wear gloves when they're working down there after that's done. So other than that, we're looking for winter weather, start ice rinks once we get to December. So.
Hopefully. Closed up for the winter as far as parks winterization?
Yep, we did keep bathrooms open an extra couple weeks this year, kind of quietly. We had not announced that we were going to close them, but the staff, as they were winterizing, kept them open. So everything is now shut and blown out. So we're basically closing everything up for the winter and cleaning things.
Are we looking at anything different for winter sports if we do have a winter this year?
I don't think necessarily anything different other than this is the first year that Sirimer Park will have everything done construction-wise. So if we have a good cold winter, that's the last rink to go in, but that'll be the first year that we have a structure next to that. Otherwise, it'll be pretty similar.
Are we expecting just the rink, or are we expecting the track at Sirmore?
A figure 8 is what we talked about, kind of like a single track. That's how it was drawn. I mean, the site will dictate a lot. If we don't get great cold weather, the crew, I kind of yield to what the crew can make, but our goal is if we can do kind of a single track, figure 8 is what we want to do.
Do we have any playoff games?
We do not. I will share, obviously, the sound system has definitely had feedback in the Goerke neighborhood. Well, colleague could probably speak to that too. We did not seek out neutral site games just because we want to be as good a neighbors as we can. Spash, unfortunately, got eliminated early. Pacelli wasn't eligible. So this year we have not sought out any neutral site games to just kind of let the new normal adjust here too a little bit.
I will tell you whatever adjustments were made on the sound system, it's harder to hear at my parents' house than it is at my house. I can hear it louder at my house, and my parents are closer.
Over the year or just as of late?
As of whatever adjustments were made in the past. Like I was thinking the other day, or the university was playing, I could not hear the game inside my parents' house, but you can hear it plain as day at my house.
You're in Indiana?
Yeah.
Is this the crowd noise or the announcers?
The announcing.
Okay.
The loudspeaker. Like it was really muted at my dad's house, but at my house you could hear it.
It funneled down. Not this year.
I can hear the crowds and I'm a mile away. So, I mean.
Yeah, you can hear that. The sound system was toned down.
All right, everybody. Well, it was a long meeting, so item 8, the
Motion to
adjournment. Thank you. All right.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.